Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of Becoming Bob. This is Alex, and in this episode I'll be painting along with Bob as we create a beautiful pastel winterscape. Starting out there with my 1-inch brush. Got my 24 by 18 inch canvas there, of course, pre-coated with a layer of liquid white in order to help the paint really blend together. Started out with a bright orange there in the center. Now I'm kind of going with an orangish pink color around the outside. I'm just creating a nice, beautiful sunset. Just blending it all together with little crisscross strokes. And now going in and pulling out a little bit darker color there. Kind of a lavender color. Of course, I'll be blending these colors together up here in the sky with the large brush here in a second to make it all nice and give it that nice wintry kind of glow. Looking in with a little bit more of that pink color now. And if you look at my palette on this one, you will see some different colors that I don't usually start out with. Before starting this painting, Bob had a few others pre-mixed there on the palette as well, so I made sure to have those ready because I didn't want to try to be mixing those while at the same time trying to keep up with the painting. So you can see I'm putting the gray on now. That's kind of a mix of the blue and the brown with a little bit of white. It's a real common gray color that he uses a lot. But, you know, having it all pre-mixed beforehand made this a lot easier. I've also got that lavender color there. You can see the next ring in. That was a mixture of alizarin crimson and the Prussian blue. Then you can see the kind of pink color there, which was alizarin crimson mixed with white, and then the orange towards the center there, which was a mix of permanent red and yellow to make a really nice, bright, and hot orange color. Like I said I would, I'm going in there with the 2-inch brush and blending in all those colors in the sky. And I'm also pulling it in from the side there to create that watery effect. I'm being very careful to try and make sure that my brush strokes are nice and horizontal and not wiggly, not too wild. The water needs to be nice and still. Just going in and cleaning that blender brush off now. Really tried to make sure that my water and my sky came down to meet each other, so that I didn't end up with a white gap in between the two. I'd have to then try to cover up with my other layers. But I think you'll see that I tried to make sure I did a pretty good job of providing edge-to-edge coverage on this painting. Now with some liquid white mixed with the titanium white, going in and creating a nice bright sun in the center there. Just really kind of working it into that canvas, grinding it in there. And now adding some sun rays coming out of the center there, trying to make sure that they're good and straight and relatively faint, but still noticeable up there in the sky. And then just blending it all together. It's so critical when you're doing these kind of paintings to have the right amount of liquid white on the canvas when you start. It really facilitates all the blending of the other colors, and if you have too much, it becomes a muddy mess, and if you don't have enough, you hardly get any blending at all. It's very dry, and you just end up scraping around on the canvas. Mixing up a little bit more there with a bit of a purpley color, and some alizarin crimson to my gray color. I'm going in now to create some nice far off distant mountains. And these are going to be very far off and misty and kind of faint. Just putting them in now with the palette knife, but I'm going to go back in here with the 2-inch brush and just kind of smooth it all out. And unlike other times when I do mountains, I won't be going back in to add rocky, snowy texture with the palette knife. Just some nice sleepy mountains off in the distance. Just pulling those slopes down. It's in this stage where you really shape the mountains and kind of decide how those mountains are going to be laid out, which ones will be closer, and how everything kind of slopes down from there. Now with that brush, the 2-inch brush there, I'm just kind of tapping in a ridge line that'll be a lot closer to us than the mountains there. And pulling it down into my water there to create a nice reflection. And to really be careful and be conscious about the shoreline that I'm creating. And kind of pulling up real gently there. Try and create a kind of a rough top to the part I just put in there to make it look like they're individual trees sticking up out of the mass of trees. Cleaning that brush again. Important to have a clean brush when you're trying to do any sort of blending like this. Picking up some liquid white and mixing it in with my pink color there. And just going in and trying to cut that water line in. Really define where that shoreline is. Create those reflections, those little ripples. And now I've got my fan brush there, picking up some crimson and more of that kind of blue and purple color there. Mixing some brown in as well. Just kind of make a scraggly brush color, I guess you could call it, which I'm going in here now to kind of put in some clumps of vegetation on some of the closer terrain. Just defining where the edge of the hill there is. Just little things that'll be sticking up through the snow. Essentially what you're doing when you do that is kind of using the brush as a stamp and stamping the thing on there. The trick though is to make sure that you're not just stamping the same thing over and over again, or you end up with something that looks way too uniform and not realistic. Of course, you can see now I've got some liquid white and titanium white mixed together. Just kind of laying in some layers of snow. Just like icing a cake. It's kind of cool. The snow color that I'm putting on there kind of picked up a little bit of that, ridge of plant stuff there. And, when it's pulling it down, it kind of gives it that shadowy look in the snow that you're going to have. Mix up another Nice dark color there in the middle. And by mixing colors using the other colors you've already mixed, it really helps bring the painting together, and it makes all the colors work together really well, as though they're all part of the same palette, I guess you could say. With my 1-inch brush, just laying in some evergreen trees there on the right side. Really trying to focus on the shape of the trees I'm making to make sure that they are nice and tall, but at the same time natural looking. You know, like I was saying, you are stamping this onto the canvas essentially, and you don't want to end up stamping something that looks too uniform. Filling in some shadowy vegetation area there. Of course, this is just the bottom layer. I'll be adding other layers to give the vegetation a lot more depth and a lot more character. And one of those layers, of course, is going in and cutting in sticks and stems and trunks with my palette knife there. Got a different 1-inch brush there that I'm working in some liquid white with my titanium white and some of the tree color there. My highlight color. And some nice frosty, snowy highlights. Again, trying to be very careful about where I put those so that the highlighted areas are facing towards the sun, and then I'm leaving enough shadow that the contrast creates that three-dimensional effect. Picking up just the smallest amount of permanent red to mix in with liquid white and titanium white to add a little bit different highlight color. Kind of snow that's catching a little bit of the rosiness from the sunset. Just using that to define another layer of vegetation. And push those trees back into the background. Laying in another slope of snow there. Closer, pushing that other slope back further into the painting. Of course, every layer you add pushes all the other layers back further and further, just giving the painting more and more depth. Much like with the other slope, the snow is picking up some of the color from that vegetation and kind of pulling it down, creating the shadowy bits there at the base, adding a lot more realism to the painting. And of course, when you see me take my knife and clear away a section like this, that means it's time for a barn or a cabin. But in this case, it is a barn. Until this part of the painting, I've been pretty happy with how everything's turned out. And then I start laying on the paint for the barn, and I scraped away a lot of paint there, but there were already quite a few layers and quite a bit of liquid white as a part of those layers, and I didn't have the best of luck getting some of that brown paint to transfer onto the barn One of my goals going into this, though, was to stay relaxed and to not, you know, not get overwhelmed, you know, when it feels like things are kind of going wrong on the painting, to kind of trust in Bob, if you will. And this cabin was definitely a test of that. You can see I'm really kind of struggling just to even get the roof on there. Meanwhile, as I'm watching Bob, he's finishing things up. So I'm kind of rushing through this part, but at the same time, still trying to do my best to maintain that shape, keep my lines fairly straight. Make sure it looks like it's got that kind of element of human craftsmanship. And you put paint on so thick when you're doing these barns and cabins and stuff, because, I mean, you're putting non-thinned brown on first, and then you're going over the top of that with white and liquid white, and then often another layer on top of that, and it ends up being the thickest part of the painting most of the time, especially along the roof line, where the brown and the white really come together. You can just see it, the paint kind of just coming off of there as I'm scraping it. In this part, going back through and cutting in straight lines really helps a lot. Like I said, it really makes it kind of have that look of something a human made instead of being overly organic. Even if it is a half-rotted old barn. I really like that color that I'm using for the shadowy bits on the foliage there. It's just a nice blue, brown, gray, kind of a earthy color. I can't remember which painting it was, whether it was the fourth or the fifth one. But one of the other paintings I did this series was pretty much all in that color and white. And I really enjoyed that one. It was on a black canvas, which was a little different. Really cool nighttime effect. And now just going in and putting bigger trees. Big tree way up in the foreground like this pushes everything back further. Just gives it that much more depth. So yeah, this episode has taken me a very long time to get put together and to get made and to get posted, I'm sure. Sometimes these are kind of difficult for me to get working on, just to keep myself going. As you may have noticed with this one, I only have one version of this episode. I didn't make a shortened version. I feel like that extra work is not really doing much. I can, still say all the same things in here, and if people don't want to watch the whole thing, they can just skip through it at whatever speed they want. But I'm thinking I need to figure out some ways to streamline the process a little bit more, and hopefully I can someday get to a point where I'm cranking these episodes out at a fairly reasonable and regular rate. back in with another layer of snow. The continuation of the hill from behind there. It really kind of makes it look like it's going off into the distance there, down, sloping down towards the lake. This cold winter evening. And more foliage there. It's nice when you're doing the snowy stuff because you can be pretty liberal with the liquid white when you're going in for the highlights. You don't have to worry about not blending it well enough and ending up with white splotches. It's snow, so you're going to have white splotches anyways. But, you know, if you're going in and doing highlights, you know, in a summertime scene where you've got to mix that in well with the yellow or light green or something like that, and you don't get it quite mixed, the little white bits that it leaves just look really out of place. But the snow is nice and forgiving. And I'm now working with straight up brown again on the knife, trying to put a tree trunk in there, just sticking up through the snow in front of the other trees. And like with the barn, putting just straight up brown paint onto the painting at this point is very difficult over all those other layers, especially because there's so many mixed in with the liquid white at this point that putting, you know, a solid color like that, it just has a hard time sticking. And now just putting in a little fence line, some old rickety fence posts. Just adding another kind of side to them there to make them look a bit more 3D. Just cleaning off my knife really well there and cutting in a wire, kind of connecting them all there. I decided to just go with the one wire for some reason. Now just a little bit of vegetation there along the base of the fence line. You know, there's always that area along a fence where you can't mow it, get close enough to it, do whatever. And obviously this fence is a place that doesn't get much mowing in the first place. Just adding in some shadows coming off of the fence posts there, and I kind of like the way that turned out. They weren't perfect, but you know, nothing's really perfect at this point. Just enjoy doing something a little different. I've got my script liner brush there. Picked up some linseed oil on it and some brown. Drew it out real thin to make it kind of like ink. Just kind of going on and painting in a few more branches and sticks and things, kind of sticking up, kind of wispy things amongst the other plants. just to keep it from looking too uniform and too much like it's just, you know, one big massive bush. Adding a little something in there to cover up the base of my old bare tree there. And just cut in a few more things here and there. And more details. Lots of details in the stuff up close on this one. Of course, the closer you are, the more detail you're going to see. And once again, having more detailed layers up towards the front really makes those non-detailed layers, like those mountains, way far back in the back. Now, of course, I picked up some red and going in to sign the painting. This is, of course, my 11th painting in the series. I've got 2 more after this. The Joy of Painting had 13 episode series. And this one, though, Bob decided he wasn't done. So I guess I'm not done either. So just adding a few more details. And while I do, just want to thank you for watching Becoming Bob. You know, it's just kind of a project for me, a passion project, and I really appreciate all the support I've gotten along the way from everyone else, all my supporters on Indiegogo, you know, just all the people that I know and have given me support along the way. If you want to support the channel, feel free to like and subscribe. Yeah, I still have at least 2 more to go. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.